Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swarwood here. Tonight, I am joined by the number one New York Times bestselling author of over 16 novels, including Heat 2, that she co-authored with director Michael Mann. Her first novel, China Lake, won the 2009 Edgar Award for Best Paperback Original and was later a finalist for NPR's 100 Best Thrillers. Uh, she's there's just so much to talk about. That's your favorite writer of mine, Meg Gardiner. Meg, how the heck are you?
I'm well. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So first of all, well, we can actually just maybe start with this. So you were in this anthology, which just recently came out. Just announced today, the editors Brian Keene and Christopher Golden, USA Today bestseller, New York Times bestseller, huge anthology. For those who are not aware, it's the end of the world as we know it. Basically, new tales of Stephen King's The Stand. My understanding is that the authors who were included in the anthology could not take the legacy characters. Although I know Maurice Broaddus and Wayne Brady did do an Abigail, they got permission to do the Mother Abigail thing. But the majority, I mean, can you talk about like when they reached out to you? I guess like what was your first thought, and then just kind of like the process, like how did you go about coming up with the idea of the story that you had written, which again, the story is pretty early in the anthology. It's called Bright Light City.
Yeah, delighted to. Several years ago, Christopher Golden, who's one of the editors, uh, emailed and asked if I would be interested in contributing a story to a new anthology of new stories set in the world of Stephen King's novel, The Stand, which is my favorite novel of all time. And so I basically clawed my way through the through the keyboard and through the screen of the computer, trying to grab hold of him before he changed his mind, and said, "Of course, yes." And uh, before anything else, I have to thank Christopher Golden. I have to thank Brian Keene, the two editors of this anthology, and Stephen King, who gave permission to trust a bunch of other writers with this iconic apocalyptic world that he had created. So, yes, we were asked not to take new stories with the main characters in the novel. Yeah, said go ahead if you want to mention them in passing or reference things that are happening, sure, but don't write a new story with Randall Flagg at the center or Mother Abigail or Stu Redman and Franny Goldsmith. Come up with your own stories. So I did. I don't know if you've read The Stand or how many people have. I think quite a few have. I think something like 400 million copies have been sold
Yeah,
since it was
absolutely.
first published. I wanted to honor the legacy of the story, this world that terrified me and gripped me and just pulled me in and has never let me go. So I thought I would set the story during the worst of the superflu, the Captain Trips plague that has escaped from a bioweapons lab in the Nevada desert and is infecting the world and is about to kill 99.8% of everybody living. And much of the novel takes place after the plague in Las Vegas, but none of it takes place in Las Vegas while the world is falling apart. So I thought, okay, here's an iconic location, and how can you resist watching Las Vegas go down as the world collapses? I mean, Sin City. Uh, so I decided to set the story there, and it features several people who are immune and survive, including the main character, Danny Cooper, who's a flight attendant. And she uh, is on it turns out to be, or is supposed to be the last plane out of Las Vegas as mayhem erupts and people burst through the security and charge through the concourse and try to run down the jetway and pound on the jet and try to get into the jet to escape. they don't realize there's no place to escape to. Guy jumps on the front of the windshield of the aircraft as it's pulling back from the gate, and they don't quite get off the ground. But Danny rescues a passenger, a little girl who's an unaccompanied minor who was being evacuated to go see her dad. And it's the two of them trying to figure out what they're going to do now that they're more or less alone with evil forces starting to rally around them in this town and try to get out.
Now, was this something you had to kind of pitch an idea then to Brian and Chris first to make sure that the story you wrote was, like basically you weren't going to waste your time writing a story and then they come back and being like, wow, someone else kind of has something similar or something along those lines?
Exactly. There are what, 34, 38 contributors to the anthology. They very politely asked if we would send them our idea for the story so that they could kind of see what they were getting, make sure nobody was overlapping, see how it was going to shake out, how many people were going to write story set during the plague, how many were going to set story set afterwards, a month, a year, 10,000 years, whatever. And so, I gave him a very protean idea for my story and then started writing it and rewriting it and rewriting it. I think I started it 15 times trying to find the right way into it and the right characters. But people seem
Did,
to
did you feel a lot
react.
of pressure with this?
Do
I
I
mean,
feel pressure?
I mean, you've written, I mean, obviously Heat too, and you've done a lot of other novels and stuff, but I mean, this feels very, I mean, plus you have a relationship. I mean, Stephen King. It's not like you just are, like some of the authors in here are just, are mostly, fans and admirers of his work. I
Mhm.
mean, Stephen King has played a huge role in your career early on. So
Correct.
I don't
Mhm.
know. Yeah. I mean, like, what was that like then, I guess?
It was a privilege and a responsibility. I mean, incredible privilege to be uh, asked to contribute and trusted, as I said, to live up to the legacy of the novel. So yeah, it was daunting.
Yeah.
I've got to make sure that my chops are up to scratch and really bring my A game here and turn something out that feels like it belongs in that world. So I had once I threw out the first 14 non-starters of the way to get into the story and started going into it, I had a blast. I really did. It was exciting and freeing to see myself given permission to work in this world, but still a lot of rewrites.
Yeah, yeah. So did you feel the need to reread The Stand to get a I mean, like, when was the last time you had read The Stand?
It had been, it had probably been 20 years since I read The Stand. I had already read it several times, but it had been a while. So I immediately got a spanking brand new copy and read it. And this time I noticed that I read it while I was traveling. So I was reading it on airplanes, in airports, in restaurants, all around. And so many people would just pass by and see that book in my hands and they would say, is this the first time you've ever read that? And they would just, you could just tell that it had just seeing it, that it had made such a huge impact. And I said, it's the third, but that let me know that there was still this heartbeat for this book that is spread deep and wide.
Yeah. Well, everybody obviously can go check out the story. It
Yeah,
is,
by
well,
the way,
first of all,
Bright
real
Light
quick.
City is the title refers to the opening lyrics from Viva Las Vegas.
Yes. Did you was that always the title or did you have a previous title and then they, what I mean? Like, sometimes I know maybe titles might change obviously before
Story
publication
for
or
the Stand Anthology, I think
yeah.
was story for the Stand Anthology version
Okay.
2 through 15.
So, all right, well, let's go way back then. Do you remember what was the very first, like, I don't know, creative thing you ever did? If it's a short story, I mean, like, poem. Do you remember like kind of the very first creative thing you did?
It was something drawn with crayons. I'm sure it was about a horse. I think
Okay.
I think I was in kindergarten and I wrote a story about Pearl the farm horse, and she escaped from the mean farmer. So even then, I was probably a proto-thriller writer of some sort. And yeah, it just went from there.
And so when did you start, like getting into Stephen King, and like were there other authors through maybe middle school, high school where you started? Because I always say, I mean, being a writer is it's almost like I guess like a mental illness. Like it is not a normal thing for people who want to just live in their own worlds, creating characters, basically being isolated most of the time.
Mhm.
So, I mean, at what point did you really start thinking like this is something I really want to try to do?
Probably in high school. I mean, I was writing stories and illustrating them, of course, for my whole life. And I was a big reader of always Madeline L'Engle, Nancy Drew, the Black Stallion novels. Then I got into science fiction, Ray Bradbury, um, and uh, and then it was later on in college I got into Stephen King heavily and
Do
have
you remember
not.
your first Stephen King novel?
It was The Stand.
It was The Stand.
It
Mine
was.
was Insomnia. Did you ever read Insomnia?
I hate to say that's one of the ones that I haven't.
It is, I always say it is a novel that's probably not like ideally a person's should be a person's first Stephen King novel, but I
Uh-huh.
loved it. But it is definitely in retrospect, it's not an easy book to get into, but I really
Right.
liked it. So, okay, so your first novel, correct me if I'm wrong, was China Lake, correct?
Correct. My first published novel.
Well, that's okay. So that's what I want to get to. Okay, yes. Was that your first published novel, or was it for your first novel? Okay, so that was your first published novel. So how many other novels had you written prior to that?
Setting aside the second grade novel. So
Yeah, yeah. Setting aside the second grade one.
I had um, tried to write an abortive whodunit um, when my kids were little, and someone pointed out that nobody in the story actually died, so maybe I was mislabeling it. A friend and I tried to write a big espionage novel, which was like international and spies and conduits for smuggling, tech from the Russians to through the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked back at it at the notes, and it was just awful. Nothing happened, nothing happened in the book, except people just kept randomly dying. And I knew that looking back, I was extremely naive because I had written up all these notes when I was like 8 months pregnant with my first child, and I thought that once the baby came, I was going to have nothing but free time to write. So that was probably my first clue that I should have, that I had no idea what I was doing. But then I did write um, a novel that featured Evan Delaney, who's ended up being my series character. This was when I was living in London, and I got an agent. It was it never was ended up being published, but it did get me an agent, and it was about a sting operation to get back at some bad guys who had, killed someone and wronged another young man, and it would feature all kinds of, 1,000 very funny characters and pages and pages and pages and chapters of banter. But again, it didn't really have a strong plot. So eventually, I wrote another novel called China Lake. And
So
when my agent got that, he
yeah.
said, let's set the first one aside and go out with this instead.
Okay, so did you use elements from that first Evan Delaney book into other, titles that came out later, and then how much did that character maybe was this the same type of character? Was Evan in that book, or did Evan change like when you were writing China Lake and progressing through the series?
Evan matured. She was basically the same character. And, of all my protagonists, she's undoubtedly the closest to me in the sense that I was a lawyer, she's a lawyer. I lived in Santa Barbara, California. She lives in Santa Barbara, California. And my husband grew up at the Naval Weapons Center, China Lake, California. And that's where she grew up because it seemed easier and more comfortable and safer to use very familiar elements for the character. But in China Lake, she has something more serious to deal with. She's she's looking after her 6-year-old nephew while her brother he's a naval aviator who's deployed, and she's keeping her nephew. And then his runaway mother comes back and tries to take him with her into an apocalyptic cult, which is the book is really funny. It doesn't sound like that from from,
No, no, no,
from
no.
the
It is.
description.
It is. And I will say too, for a novel that you wrote probably what, 20 years ago, it feels
Mhm.
very timely now too. Like reading it
Okay.
now, I'm like, geez, this is
Yeah,
probably
you know,
more
when
timely
I
than ever before.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's topical still.
Yeah.
But I mean, Evan is she's younger. She's always got the right quip at the right time, unlike the rest of us who think of it, an hour later. And she at one point she defends herself with a ferret and a can of paint. She steals a Sidewinder missile, so she has quite the adventures in this novel.
Yeah. Was there concerns with basically like the China Lake Air Force Base? I mean, it's a real Air Force base. It's not like you're kind of creating your own type of fictional Air Force base to just do whatever. I mean, you're like, was that ever an issue? Like potentially legal issue? You know what I mean? Like using, because
I
I
didn't
don't know.
defame anybody at China Lake.
Well,
Let's
I'm not
put it
saying you're
that way.
defaming it, but just using specifically,
It's a
the fact
public,
that there was that base.
it's on maps. It's there.
That's
Although
okay. I
the
just didn't
city,
know if
the
like you had kind of like the inside scoop on some stuff that.
well, you know what? If you start in Las Vegas, drive west past Area 51, cross Death Valley, eventually you'll come to the gate, and if you want to know where it is, you stop when the Marines get ready to shoot at your car. And there's a biography of the city. The real city is called Ridgecrest, that's outside the gates, and it's called Secret City. But since my father-in-law was a naval officer stationed there, and my husband and in-laws grew up there, and I still have in-laws living there, I made sure that it was portrayed with admirable honesty. Let's put it that way. So,
Okay. And so these Evan Delaney books are written, are they all they're all written in first person, correct?
yeah. Which also I thought was going to be very much easier. It's easy to put yourself into a singular voice, and you
But then you're
feel
kind of
very
stuck with
free.
that point of view. Although you kind of, I don't want to say you did it cheap, but you did certain things to get to other characters'
Correct.
point of
I
views,
was like,
which I
I
mean, it
want this.
works. It worked fine.
I have a number of scenes that are in other characters' point of view, and I did that after reading like every book that James Lee Burke ever wrote and seeing how
Yes.
he unapologetically and openly did that. And I said, well, if he can do that, what's stopping me? So,
And I wanted to tell you, so I was reading there's this really great burger cheesesteak place or whatever nearby, and for whatever reason they're online, you couldn't place orders online, and it turned out just because they were getting so like busy that they basically shut it down. So I went there, I ordered, and I had time to kill, and I pull up, I was reading on my Kindle, so I just pulled it up on my phone to keep reading. And it's a pretty early scene where Evan is taking was it Luke,
her nephew, 6.
to China Lake, and on the way, they essentially get pulled over. And the scene, I'm just like reading it, and they find I'm like worried like they don't call my food number, because like it's a really great suspenseful scene because she essentially gets stuck in the back of the police car, and I don't know
She gets stuck.
as the
She gets, yes, her sister-in-law, who does not have custody of the child, comes in
they're
and
basically trying to
lies.
kidnap the kid.
Kidnap
And
kid.
as the reader, you know what's going on here, but as far, she's basically kind of stuck, and it's the same way like as the reader, you're stuck in the back of this police car as you're seeing essentially a kidnapping in process. And as far as the police are concerned, you know, Evan was the one that kidnapped the kid, and I don't know, it
Mhm.
was just a really great scene. So I just wanted to
Well,
say that
thank
it was
you.
very, very suspenseful, very well done, and obviously it won and it won the Edgar Award. However, can you talk a little bit about the fact that I guess initially when you guys shopped it in the States, and I always talk about this, in publishing, no one knows anything. It's always a miracle when anything gets published, but like, correct me if I'm wrong, like no publishers initially wanted to publish this, correct?
Nobody in the United States. No.
Yeah.
At the time, I was living in the UK, and I had a British agent, and I'd given him this book, and he said, honestly, he said, I'm going to send it to the United States. You're an American author writing a story about American characters set in California. So that's going to be our best shot. I'll send it to British publishers as well, but don't get your hopes up. And 72 hours later, I had an offer from Hodder and Stoughton, which is now part of Hachette, that they wanted to publish it and a sequel. And every American publisher that he sent it to said no, thank you. And that and then I they sold international rights for English language all around the world, every place else, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore, Hong Kong. It was sold to for French translation, Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, German, and America said, no, thank you. And that went on for 5 books, which became disheartening.
Yeah, absolutely. I
You know,
mean
but
that
I
you're
couldn't complain. I could not complain because here I was doing this thing that I had dreamed about since I was a child. I was writing novels. I would walk into Waterstones in Piccadilly in London, and there would be my novels, on the shelf or on a table. But nobody at home here could find them, and I think they thought I was making it all up after a while, you know.
no, it's true. I have this book. It's published all over the world. Because this was obviously back before ebooks, right? So it wasn't like people could just
Yes.
easily download a digital copy. And then, well, real quick, how long were you in London? Can you talk about how, like, why I guess you had moved
Oh,
there?
yeah, no, my husband was offered a job there to transfer to the London office. We lived in Santa Barbara, California, which everybody thought was paradise and thought we were insane to leave the beach and go to the land of rain. But it was the best opportunity we ever got, and we were not gonna pass it up. And it was fantastic. We thought we were going to be there for 18 months, and we were there for 19 years. So we took our 3 little kids over and got to see the UK and the world. And I got published, and we had an amazing time. If you ever have a chance to go somewhere else and embed yourself in another culture, it's amazing.
Were you there long enough? Like, did your kids start having like British accents?
They can do British accents, but they were at an international school, so
Okay,
their friends
okay.
were there was such a melange, and there were a lot of teachers who had American and Canadian and Australian accents that they sound pretty much like they're from Southern California.
Yeah. And this was like over 20 years ago. I mean, obviously the internet was still around. I feel like doing research is probably easier today. There's just so many more resources, but like you're writing essentially these books set in America, but living in London, were there times where you had to kind of like go back and do research to make sure that you were getting like certain places correct and where you had grown up?
Well, yeah, I mean, and of course we would always go back and visit my family in Santa Barbara. And there was one day that I wanted to find a place where I was going to set a hit and run accident in Santa Barbara on this road. The book is called Mission Canyon, and there I wanted to make sure that it was accurate by that I had the exact turn on the road that people would know it was for real. And I drove up and down and up and down and up and down with my kids in the back until they were basically screaming, "I thought we were going to get ice cream!" And then, uh, I came back and I emailed my editor in London. I said, "I can't I can't find a curve. I can't, the road doesn't fit the story." And she wrote back and she said, "Oh, please, it's fiction." She said, "Make up a curve, add an extra curve in that road." She goes, "And if you get nitpickers writing to complain, just be happy. It means they read your book."
Yeah, that's a way of looking at it. All right, so let's get into basically you've had these five novels, and then how did they come about being published in the United States?
Well, some people may have heard this story, but I never tire of repeating it. Um, Stephen King was coming to the UK for a book tour, and we had the same British publisher. And of course, they for years had been sending him boxes and boxes of every book they published, hoping that he would pick one up and enjoy it and say something nice about it. And as he was getting ready to catch his flight, he dug through his closet and found one of those boxes looking for something to read on the plane. And he pulled out China Lake. And I wish I could say that he was overwhelmed by the beauty of the prose when he opened the cover, but he saw that the font looked nice and big and wasn't going to tax his eyes on a red eye flight to London, so he stuffed it in his carry-on, and he read it on the plane. And when he landed, he said he'd loved it, and so of course they gave him all the rest of my books, and then he found out that I did not have an American publisher, and because he is very gracious and generous person who pays it forward. He wrote a blog post urging people to find my books and read them. And then he wrote a column for Entertainment Weekly urging people to find my books and read them.
I was going to
And
ask about that. The yeah, because he had used to have that column, and I remember I think what was it some audiobook narrator he had also kind of Ron McClarity or something, and basically it was like the best book you'll never read or something because
mhm.
and then that became a huge deal. All of a sudden, publishers who did not want that book previously were bidding
Right.
on this novel.
Yeah. And that was published. And at that, I was so thrilled. And then I quickly realized he had written this because he had probably sent the book to his publisher or to somebody he knew, and they also said no thanks. But by the next day, I think like 14 American publishers had reached out to me. They changed, they'd kind of were curious enough at least to take a look at it. And it happened, and this is for everybody who's a writer, that at that time I had decided uh, to start a new series. I mean, you know how it is. You've got a lot of stories. Some work with one characters. Other stories you need a different protagonist set in a different world. It might be a standalone. You might need a different setting. So I had like five chapters of this new novel I was writing with a forensic psychiatrist named Joe Beckett, who performs psychological autopsies for the San Francisco Police Department. So American publishers got hold of things like China Lake, but I also had something brand new to send them, a synopsis and the opening chapters of that book. And so Dutton, which is part of Penguin Random House, it bought that book and my entire backlist. So I always say, it was serendipity, it was luck, it was timing. Um, but if opportunity knocks, be ready to open the door.
No,
So
absolutely. So with the new Joe Beckett book and then the backlist, like how many titles were coming out in a year? I mean, how like did they space those out? Was it every other month, or how did they do that? Because oftentimes publishers don't really want to, get
right,
titles out so quickly.
exactly. Dirty Secrets Club, which is the first Joe Beckett novel, came out, I think, in June 2000, May or June 2008. And then at the time it was Berkeley published, published all the Evan Delaney novels in paperback, bringing them out one every month.
Oh,
So I
wow.
had like six books out in 2008 in the United States. So,
Very
and then China
nice.
Lake was nominated for the Edgar,
It was,
which
and it won.
and it won,
And it won.
which was such an incredible validation. And look,
There he is.
the dude, Edgar Allan Poe,
There
he
is. And,
abides.
and again, I was telling you in the green room, I'm reading China Lake right now, and it's such, you know, especially for your like one of your earlier novels, it's very accomplished, and it's just insane to know that this is a book that was rejected. And again, it just goes. I was talking to someone the other night. Like a lot of good books get rejected for one reason or
Mhm.
another. So, it is a very aggravating part of being a writer. When you're on
Right.
submission, but again, it's just kind of like part of the process. But
Right. Yeah.
well, okay, so let's go on. So let's go back to the Joe Beckett. So you wrote the primarily all of the Evan Delaney books were in first person. Joe Beckett when third person. Is that just
Mhm.
because you decided you just kind of wanted to? Were you feeling stuck with that first person narrative and you wanted to
No,
write more third or
I never felt stuck. And as I told you, I had plenty of scenes in the Evan Delaney novels where I just
right?
stuck them in the gave the point of view to somebody else. There were by the fifth novel, there were plenty of scenes that were in other points of view. And then when I wrote the Joe Beckett, I think my editor said, if this is going to really be a big thriller series, third person is the way to go. Then you won't have people saying, well, why is it just, why are you cheating on first person? Uh, and that it gave it a different vibe, I think, and I felt very comfortable writing it. I felt wrote Joe's scenes in a very deep and close third person point of view, but felt very comfortable spreading out the way other characters got a chance to have their say.
Yeah. And then the Nightmare Thief, you brought Evan back in. What was
Mhm.
that decision like where you want to do kind of a crossover?
It was great. It was my American editor at the time, Ben Severe, who said, "How would you feel about having Evan come in?" And I said, "She's knocking on the door. Let me go open it and see what we can do." It complicated the narrative a little bit, but it was fun because you start to realize you've got these two characters who aren't the same and whose whose voices are different. And how am I going to fit Evan into this adventure story? And I wrote her in that book. I wrote her in third person as well, so that it wouldn't seem like it was these awkward first person interjections. But it was fun. It was great to have them cross paths.
And that audio book looks like that won the 2012 Audio Award, which is
It
a
did.
huge audiobook award. So congratulations
Yes.
on that. Although I've talked to a lot of narrators, I know that usually like the audio award really goes to the publisher, not the author or the narrators. It goes to the
Right.
publisher. But so are you ever going to, I mean, are those series essentially done or do you think maybe in the future you might want to revisit either
I would
character?
love to revisit them, and who knows? I get a lot. I still get a lot of requests for Evan, and you're reading China Lake, for which I thank you very much. Um, the fifth novel, this is the last one that's published, and it ends on a not quite a cliffhanger, but on with the central relationship in the series uh, very unsettled. So of course, I have the next novel sketched out as so to see what happens with them. And Joe Beckett has made a crossover appearance as well in my Unsub series. She is in The Dark Corners of the Night. She's the consultant for the FBI agent who is the series lead in that story.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get into the unsub series, but first you had done a few other standalones. So,
Mhm.
do you feel more comfortable writing a series than standalones?
I switch back and forth. You get into a series and you feel so comfortable in the world. If you're going to start a new story, you've got people you've got a world you understand where they live, how they live, what they're interested in, what and but the standalone is can be very freeing, even though you've got to do all the work of world building again
Yeah.
and character building. But if you've got a story that is its own self-contained thing, you just gotta write it.
Um, Man, we're really kind of moving along here. I don't want to keep up. So there's so much to fit in. Well, let's just talk about the writing process in general. How has your writing process changed over the years? Are you somebody who likes to just kind of plot it out, or are you somebody who just has that idea character and sit down and just kind of let things, start writing and see what happens and see where the characters of the story lead you?
I outline, and that's because I know what happens when I don't. So I've tried. I've gotten a novel that it's not didn't even turn into a novel. I was going to write a thriller, and I think I got 65 pages into it and was just wallowing. And so I had characters cross the street, and a like blinding set of headlights came on, and screeched up the street to try to run them down. And that was the last page I wrote because I had no idea why anybody wanted to run these people down, or who was driving the car. And the blinding headlights were just the sign that I didn't have a story. There was no place to go. So I realized that if I didn't want to end up way up a creek every single time, I needed to learn how to figure out where the story starts and where it leads and where it ends. Because then I can make sure, if I know the end, I can make sure I started it in the right place. So I began to outline very sketchily at first. Like I would send my editor a paragraph of an idea for a story, and then half a page. And finally, once I started writing Unsub and that series, I really began to write almost story treatment for the novel. And this works for me. I know for a lot of people it doesn't. But to really kind of, it's not even an outline or a synopsis. It's the last outline I wrote for Shadowheart, which is the latest unsub novel. I think it was 20 pages.
Oh, wow. And then
Yeah.
do you ever then find like during the actual writing process, maybe feel your characters or story starting to kind of go away from that, or you have to kind of pull it back in, or I mean, how does that kind of work, or
Of
basically
course,
like
yeah.
beat by beat, it just stays the same as what your treatment is.
Well, if I could just do it beat by beat, that would be super simple. But you start really writing. I mean, the story treatment might have little mini scenes. It does not really have more than a line or two of dialogue. So as you start to write, you begin to learn who these characters are through their voice, through, the way they talk, what they say, what they're thinking. And some of them grow larger, some of them might shrivel. I can come to a spot where I think of something better and I just really sit back and think, okay, is it better? Or am I just looking at a shiny object and want to try something new? And get to the end, see, have I driven the characters to the end of the line?
Yeah.
Because it's always about character. And you got to really see, have I made them dig deep enough? Have I found out who they really are? Have they been forced to confront their their greatest fears, their greatest challenges, and rise to the occasion with their every last breath? That's what you want to do in a thriller.
And then what about like the actual writing process? Like, are you sitting down every day trying to like knock out so many thousand words a chapter? I mean, or does it vary really day by day?
When I'm writing the first draft, I do try to knock out the words. I trained myself to write 2,000 words a day. And I used to not. I used to think 1,000 words a day was really stretching it and aggressive and hard. And it was talking to Brett Battles, who is a friend and a thriller
Brett
writer.
probably has already written 5,000 words in the time that
Well, we're
we've been
talking here
talking
with us.
today.
Yes. I said, how do you write? And he said, I usually write a first draft in 8 weeks. And I said, you cannot do that. A book in 8 weeks. And he goes, sure you can. So I just write it. I don't edit it. I sketch it out ahead of time, but I just write it. And I thought, okay, maybe I don't need to like tear my hair out and agonize and get anxious about the precious, how precious my sentences are in a first draft. Maybe, especially if I have got the story, what I think is the strong concept and outline for the story in my head, maybe I could do that. So I sat down and tried it. And guess what? As long as you don't care
It's a
how
vomit
terrible
draft.
it
That's
is.
what Nora Roberts calls it, a vomit or a vomit
Yeah,
draft. So,
I call it
yeah, I
the
mean,
bus draft.
first drafts are always meant to be sloppy. I think
Right.
sometimes writers get into their heads where they always want, it to be as perfect as possible, and I think you have to get past that and realize a lot of your first draft is just going to be messy, and it's
Mhm.
okay.
Once I let myself get in that headspace, and I said, okay, if Brett, who also grew up at China Lake Naval
Oh
Weapons Center, went to the same high
wow.
school as my husband, if he could do that, then I was going to try to do it too, and I have started doing it that way, and have never looked back.
Okay,
Because
so
I can
then you're
always you
not.
can edit a blank you can edit words, you can't edit a blank page.
Absolutely. So, okay, so you do not necessarily then edit as you go along. You get out that first draft first, and then
Mhm.
you go back and then just kind of go from there. Okay.
Right.
Um, so a little bit. So the unsub series. I know the most recent one is Shadowheart. Do you have I mean, at that time, did you know it was going to be a series? I guess even with
Yeah.
China Lake, did you initially know that this was going to be a series? Because I know that oftentimes at least a lot of early novels by authors that become series, usually just always a standalone that then gets turned into a series. Like, was that the case
Yeah.
with China Lake?
I wrote China Lake, and then I was fortunate enough to have a two-book contract, and I'm like, woohoo! And then the editor came in and said, "Hey, how about a sequel?" And I'm like, "Of course." And then I was like, "Oh God, what happens next?" And she goes, "And it'll be due in a year." And then I really freaked out because, of course, I had never had publishing deadline before, but I learned how to write more efficiently and not waste months at a time. And what was your question about Shadow Heart?
Well, basically going back to the unsub. I mean, so like
Right.
at this point,
Oh,
was
yes, I
unsub
did. Yeah.
always meant to be a series, the first book in a series,
Yes.
okay?
I created that with a series in mind. It's the first Unsub is the first novel I wrote where the protagonist is in law enforcement. I'd written all these thrillers, but the characters were always possibly law adjacent. Evan's a lawyer. Joe Beckett consults for the San Francisco Police Department. When the Shadow Tracer is about a skip tracer, uh, so they're close to the law, the people who were in law enforcement, but they are not. Don't ask me why. I should sit and meditate on why I never wanted to have any of my characters be cops or federal agents, but that's what I made Caitlin Hendricks. She starts out as a cop and is recruited to the FBI. Because if we're going to write about someone who's hunting serial predators, she really needs a badge and a gun
Yeah, absolutely. I
and the
mean, so is that
resources
some?
of the FBI.
So did you like how much research then goes into that? Like, are you somebody who likes to do research, or do you feel sometimes research gets in the way of what you're trying to do?
I love research, and of course, it can get in the way because there is always more you can do. There's another rabbit hole you can go down. There are more weeks when you can sign up to go do courses and learn stuff about a profession or, winemaking or whatever you want to do for your novel. But you just have to sit down and start writing then. Mhm.
And when you are writing, I mean, I imagine just having read some of your work that like are you seeing it in your head playing out like a TV show or movie? Just because again, we had talked a little bit in the green room. I just you're very descriptive in terms of just the setting, like the way the sunset is, and like the different colors, and just different like way. Like I mean, like are you seeing it really like playing out as you're writing?
Absolutely. And I want readers to get a sense of it and learning how to do that. I mean, you write the first draft and it's like a page of weather. And by the time you edit it to the final draft, that there might be a sentence about the sun setting through the smoke of the wildfires up the coast or something like that. But I think it's really important to ground the story in the physical world
Yeah.
wherever it is and give readers a sense of what it feels like to be there where the story is unfolding.
So do your first drafts then do they expand a little bit then as you start going back with multiple drafts, or are they actually getting, you're actually cutting and making them tighter?
I'm usually cutting like That I find it easier to cut than to, which means I give myself permission in the first draft just to like write a sentence and oh that was kind of a dull way to say it. I won't cut that. I'll just rewrite it another way and then woohoo, look at all those words I wrote now. So
Yeah. So, do you know how many? I mean, when you're writing a series like Unsub, specifically, you said that you wrote Unsub to be the first book in a series. Do you have in your head how many books you might be able to squeeze out of it, or is it one of those kind of like just book by book, or
book by
or do
book.
you maybe
I
like
don't
have it
know.
like an endpoint in mind where I think I can definitely get to, X number book?
I don't. I want to go and keep the series lively and fresh and interesting to readers. Every unsub novel has a separate case that Caitlin is primarily working on. Uh, each of them sparked by some real life crime. But there is a thread that of an unsolved case that runs through all the books. So I hope that I will continue writing enough novels to decide when I'm ready to finally solve that final unsub case for her, so that readers won't get mad. The readers get mad for a couple of things. You may know this. They get mad if you leave something hanging and never resolve it. And two, they're especially mad if they think that you might have left a dog in danger.
And if you mess up some type of like guns,
Oh God, yes,
some type of caliber, like the wrong caliber, like it's the wrong whatever. And yeah,
exactly.
you're going to get a lot of emails. So I want to jump real quick into this little book. Well, actually, not this little book, this big book
Uh-huh.
right here, Heat 2. So you had the opportunity to co-author the sequel to the movie Heat. And it was really fascinating where it was like, they're going to make a novel. The sequel is going to be a novel, which also might one day become a movie. You know what I mean? So, but like, can you talk about a little bit just how this came about and a little bit about just kind of the process working with Michael Mann?
Sure. I hope everybody has seen Heat, the what now classic saga crime drama starring Robert De Niro and Al Pacino as a robber and the cop who's hunting him. And it's not exactly a cat and mouse because it's not predator and prey. It's predator and predator going after each other at the top of their games. So it's about their confrontation, their conflict, and the rapport they actually build. As Neil McCauley is running this really high-level crew of robbers, and Vincent Hanna is trying to bring them down, and it is now regarded as one of the greatest crime movies of all time. And it takes place over about 3 weeks. And Michael Mann, who wrote and directed the movie, had always hoped that there would be a chance to tell more of the story of the people in Heat, both before and for those who survive after the movie. And so we
Yeah,
share
and
a
real quick,
literary
just
agent.
yeah, just real quick. So for people who have not read it yet, like it's like the prologue basically kind of gives you that like this is what happens in the movie,
Correct. The prologue is
and
just a
then
few pages long, and
And then the novel essentially is jumping back and forth between what happened before the events of the movie and then what
Mhm.
happens after the events of the movie and kind of goes back and forth like
Exactly.
that. So,
Right. So you understand where the characters came from, what they were doing in before and after. In the novel opens with it opens a few hours after the movie ends with Val Kilmer's character, Christopher Hurless, the only survivor of the crew, trying to ghost his way out of Los Angeles with Hannah hot on his tail. And then it jumps back a number of years to Chicago, where Hannah is a homicide cop, and Neil is running a very high stakes series of of heists, including a massive bank tunnel heist. So purely for research, did spend some time on the phone with a retired bank robber, retired, has served his debt to society. But if you ever need to know the ins and outs of tunnel jobs, hit me up. Um, it jumps forward after to Paraguay, where Chris eventually escapes to and starts a new life, starts to look to the new century, think about why things went so wrong for the crew, and what does he want to continue living? He wants to continue living a criminal life, but not in that way. And so he goes tech, he goes modern, and then it winds up in Los Angeles and in the Southeast Asia with Hannah after a very, 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 very bad guy. And it was again a daunting, thrilling, challenging book to write. Michael had always known who these characters were, and for the movie, he had written extensive biographies for all the main characters. None of that material made it into the film, but he'd given it all to the actors so they could know more about who these guys were, and that could help inform their performances. But it was this treasure trove of really rich, deep background stories and character studies that we got to use in the novel.
And so the actual like writing process,
Mhm.
I'm assuming this was very like outlined, where you guys really kind of came up with that structure of the back and forth.
Yeah, and this was because I mean he'd had these characters in his mind for 20 years, and I went into the project fully on board with knowing that these were his characters, that I was being invited again to enter into their world, and I wanted the project to help realize his ambitions for the story. I mean, he's an extremely accomplished writer. He's written numerous screenplays, including Heat, and he's collaborated quite a bit with other screenwriters. He had not, he's got a degree in English as well. He had not written a novel, which he knew very well was a very different beast. So he wanted to work with someone who had experience, telling a story in 450 pages or whatever, and knowing all the conventions and roadblocks and advantages of writing in prose rather than in final draft for screenplay.
Yeah.
But so we talked. We This started during COVID, so we couldn't get together. We just were on the phone. We were sending emails back and forth, and he had the basic ideas for the sections of the book. The before sections. There's gonna be a tunnel job in Chicago. Hannah's gonna be chasing a home invader in Chicago. Neil's crew is going to do a stash house takedown on the Mexican border. Those were going to be the big sections before heat occurs, and then afterwards, Chris escapes. He starts this new life. We go back to Hannah in Los Angeles, years later, and then the home invader hasn't disappeared after all. So it all kind of comes together in the end. So he had those big sections in mind, but yeah, outlining, swapping back and forth, and then eventually I just knew that I had to sit down and see if I could write something that he liked, because if he didn't, there wasn't any point in continuing. So I just wrote the opening section and I sent it to him, and fortunately, we kept going.
So was a lot of the prose mostly all you, you know what I mean? Or like was he writing chapters as well and you guys were going back and forth with that?
A lot of the first draft, I said, let me take a swing at the first draft, working from our outline and all of his notes and his character studies and etc. And having read the Heat screenplay and seeing and getting a sense of his writing voice and how he understood the characters, how propulsive and vivid his writing was, and trying to figure out how we could meld that. So I took a swing at the first draft, and then he took a swing at a second draft, and then from there on we were going back and forth until it was pretty much knit together without a way to tell who had written who had
Yeah.
written what.
and from a very writer geeky standpoint, of course, I don't know about you, but I always know, or I always notice, like the tense or the point of view. Like, so this is
Mhm,
written in third person present tense. Had
mhm.
you ever written any of your other stuff in any present tense?
I had written a short story in
So a
third
short story.
person,
So, and
present tense.
I'm assuming because I've talked to Jordan Harper, like he's been a screenwriter for stuff, and he just kind of feels more natural now
Mhm.
writing, even though she writes shotgun. His first novel was was past tense. He even said if he wrote it nowadays, he would probably write in present tense. Is this written in kind of present tense because of that, more cinematic screenwriting style?
Could be.
Okay, I didn't know if that was like a conversation
It
you guys
was
had
it
where it
was
was
his.
like,
I mean, I think the outline was written in present tense. I think I uh, the prologue was written in past tense, and then so I thought, well, should we continue in past tense? And he said, "What do you think about writing in present tense?" And the moment he said that, I said, "This is exactly what the story needs." So we did that, and it worked.
so from that first initial being signed on, like how long did it take then to get, before the book essentially came out? Because obviously publication schedule can
Right.
vary based on product, but or on the project. But I mean, was there a long time in between, or did this come together pretty quickly? Because I'm assuming like, oh, and that's another question. Like during this process, were you working on anything else, like your own work, or basically did you have to put a pin in all that?
I had finished. I actually finished writing the first draft of Shadowheart, and so was waiting to get edits on that. And we just from our first phone call to publication was about 2 years on Heat 2. It's a big book, and there were a
Yeah.
lot of drafts. And I mean, and the outline changed, and we got new ideas. And after the first draft was complete, Michael has particularly decided we need a bigger third act. We need a bigger part six. So I flew out to LA. By then, COVID was over, and we wrestled the thing over his desk for a week and went out on rode along with two LAPD sergeants late at night to get a sense of what the South Figueroa Street is like at midnight on a on an unpleasant LA ride
Had you
out.
done ride-alongs prior to that?
Uh, I'd ridden along with the Austin Police Department just on a on a daytime downtown shift, which was very sedate.
Yeah.
And I mean, riding along with Michael was nothing is ever sedate,
I
but
imagine he's like, this, I'm sure the cops probably, he's like a celebrity with a lot of these
they knew
cops who
him.
are huge
These were
fans
two
of,
cops. These were two cops
yeah.
that he had known for quite a long time, and it was an extremely informative and helpful for research evening and a heck of a lot of fun too. Very interesting people and experiences. So, and some of it, most of that shows up in the book as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a really great book. I would imagine, I mean, from the outside hearing like they're going to do a novel sequel of Heat, like what is this? But like, yeah, it was great. It was
Thank
very
you.
good. So, congratulations. Did you real quick in the time remaining? So Shadowheart just recently came out, fourth book in the Unsub series. That just well, I should say recently came out in paperback. It
Correct.
it had already
It
been
was
out
out last year in hardcover, and it was nominated for
for the
the
ITW Thriller Award.
IGW Thriller
Yeah,
Awards. So I
absolutely.
was extremely excited about that, and it's just come out in paperback, and it is number four in the Unsub series, where Caitlin uh, discovers that there are two serial killers who seem to be in a competition with each other, and so she has to dive into not one but two dark and twisted minds and figure out if that's what's really going on, what's happening. One of them is in prison, the other is an unsub, unidentified. So she has to realize this is not a cold case that she's working, but something that's turned very hot, and try to stop anybody else from getting killed.
And then do we like I guess like what are you working on now? Do we have an idea of when your next book's going to be out?
I am working on a new standalone thriller, again with Michael Mann.
Ooh,
So we are writing
oh, that's
another, we're writing
exciting.
another book. It's going to be an international manhunt thriller, and that's what I can tell you at the moment. But I'm very
That
excited
is
about that.
exciting. Just what is your ratio been so far between like your titles that you submitted to the publisher versus what they end up being published
Titles of
under? Like,
books.
have you had a lot of
Uh,
luck or not so much?
I would have been taken out of the rotation of any major league team if I with this terrible batting average for my titles. No, I'd say probably most of the titles have been chosen by the publisher.
Okay.
So yeah.
So the last question I have for you, can you talk a little just about the fact that you are a Jeopardy champion? And this is like in the good old days of Jeopardy when Alex Trebek was there, right? Like, so like,
Yes,
how many times did you, I'm assuming you're a fan of Jeopardy. Like, how long
of
had you been
course.
watching it prior
Been
to that?
watching it for years, and I always thought, I could do better than these guys. I'm smarter than them. Come on, man. But finally one night, my husband may have been the one that said it, like, well, look, it always says if you want to be a contestant on Jeopardy, call this number. And so I finally did. And I tried out and they asked me on the show, and I was a three-time champion. And it was the most fun I've ever had standing up. It was absolutely amazing and wonderful. I'm a kind of a competitive person, so yeah.
At what stage in your career? I mean, had you been publishing at that point?
No, not at all. This was my daughter was 18 months old, I think, at the time. She was mine. Didn't even have her brothers hadn't even been born yet, and I had not published a single thing. But I mentioned my daughter. Years later, my daughter also became a Jeopardy champion.
Wow,
She
it
was
runs in the
actually
family.
it was bittersweet. She was one of the very final contestants who ever got to tape with Alex Trebek,
Oh,
like
wow.
like the last week that he ended up being on the show. But I believe we are possibly the only mother-daughter Jeopardy
That's
champions.
amazing. That's amazing because like you have to take a test, right? Like you have to take a
Mhm.
certain test and it has to like
Right.
is it within a
It's
certain amount
pop
of time?
culture. Yeah. Oh, yeah. At the time when I took it, this was so long ago, Alex had his mustache. And it was a written test that, it's a mix of pop culture and arcane, Civil War history, because Alex was a Civil War buff, and, Canadian provinces, because he was Canadian, like it's like basically like who was combination of what year was the Battle of Shiloh, and then who played Bob Newhart's wife on the Bob Newhart show, that kind of thing. And it's 100 questions and you have to get 85%, and they give you 15 minutes to do it. And then whoever passes the test gets to play a mock game, and then they give you a little interview to make sure that you don't sound like you're made out of
Or
wood. And
yeah, and like you're just going to be like standing staring at the camera the entire time.
right.
Did
Yeah.
you shoot all your episodes in one? Because like typically they like stack all those episodes. Like how many days did you do, or was it just the one day?
They do five at a time. And I don't, who knows whether you're going to be, which show you're going to be on. If you get on the last show of the week and then you win, they're going to ask you to come back another day to film the next time, which is what happened to me. But they took a break because I think it was the college tournament was taping the next week or something. So at that point, I was like, okay, now I've really got to make sure I know all my know all my stuff. So I went home and I like checked out books from the library and memorized Shakespeare titles and famous works of art and Union generals and Canadian flags. I don't know what it was, but then I went back a couple weeks later, and it was great. If you ever want to do it, you should.
I have no interest, but thank
Okay.
you. But for anybody out there who wants to do it, it's definitely no. Yeah, it's incredible to be able to just. I mean, because I mean, I'm assuming it's like. Did you feel pressure? I mean, you're up there with two. Was it two other people, and
Right.
you have the time. I mean, like, or I don't know, what was that like? Just knowing that. I mean,
Honest to
obviously, like
God,
you're not.
it was
No, yeah.
all the nerves were beforehand because you're watching everybody
Mm.
else play. You're seeing who's doing well. You're going, oh my gosh, this guy is unbeatable. Am I going to get up there and trip over my own 2 feet as I walk out and like smash my head into the into the podium, and am I going to make an idiot of myself? Am I going to embarrass my family? Am I going to barf? What's going to happen? But the moment I went out there, and you stand out there and you're looking at the set and you're like, holy cow, this is really cool. This is so cool. I'm actually here. I'm not at home yelling at the TV. This is it. I get to play Jeopardy. So, and after that, I think all the nerves went away. And it was then you're just like in the game and then competitive.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's incredible. So, with the time remaining, real quick, is there anything you've read, watched, listened that you enjoyed, want to recommend to anybody?
all the stories and the end of the world as we know it. It's a great anthology, a place to start. I read a lot of great stuff, and I will actually say that here's the book that I have been looking forward to, and I'm about to read. Crooks by Lou Berney is
Ah,
out next
Lou,
month.
yes.
He is. I'm going to be interviewing him at the Poison Pen in Scottsdale next month, so I am thrilled. He is one of my favorite authors, and
Yeah,
cannot
I'm
wait.
going to be chatting with him too in a couple of weeks. I know that, yeah, it was very, actually at Thriller Fest. Jason Rekulik was fanboying over him. He was like, because he had just read, I guess, an arc of Crooks, and he was blown away, and he was so excited to meet him. And I wanted to read Crooks already, but like now I really wanted
Right.
to read Crooks because like everybody has said it's just an amazing book.
So I'm very excited about that.
Okay. And then is there anything you've been watching or listening to that you've enjoyed?
Poker Face.
Poker
Uh,
Face,
Loved
yes.
Poker Face. Watched Duster, which was an HBO series set in the early 70s. It's
And only one season, unfortunately.
too bad. You know, Jerry Williams, who is an author, former FBI agent, very involved with thriller writers. She was a consultant on that. She was basically the Nina Hayes character in real life.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a really fun show. It was a
it
shame. I
was
mean,
very fun. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes you watch shows and you're like, you hope they get a second season, but you're also not
Hmm.
surprised sometimes. And that was one where
Right.
I was like, it'd be cool to get a second season, but when I heard
Right.
that was
Yeah.
canceled, I was like, yeah.
Mhm.
So, but all right, well, Meg, thank you so much for making time.
Of
Everybody
course.
go check out all of Meg's books. Obviously, I think that's another thing too. That's really, I think, impressive about your career is like it's now over what 20 years, or I guess your first novel was published when?
Well, it depends on whether you're looking at Britain or the United States. China Lake was published in
Let's
the
go
US.
Britain.
It was 2002.
2002. So essentially over 20 years, a lot of authors don't last like 2 or 3 years. So the fact that you've, been over 2 decades, congratulations. The
Thank
longevity
you.
is incredible. All your stuff is still, as far as I can tell, it's all still in print, correct?
Hmm. I'm just
That's
so
another big
stubborn,
thing. A lot of
man.
authors don't have their stuff in print. So yeah, congratulations. Obviously, if people have not checked it out, Heat 2 is a great novel.
Mhm.
Hopefully,
And
fingers
there's
crossed. Or
the other one
is it?
we've been talking about, which is Shadow
And
Heart.
there, Shadow Hearts now in paperback.
Hmm.
And then did you are they looking to do a movie or TV show for Heat 2? Because I feel like a movie is not enough time for all that story.
News to come.
Oh, okay. Can't wait. All right. So anyway, go check out. Oh, and then if people wanted to stalk you online, where can they do that?
I am on Blue Sky, Threads, X, Facebook, Instagram. If you just like Meg Gardiner, Gardiner, pops up with this face, you can find me there. I love to talk about books, love to talk about writing. So seek me out.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Meg, for making time to chat, and thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye.